Coming up on Network Africa, bodies of 8 women and 13 children discovered as death toll in DR Congo landslide goes up. Kenya to launch its first Earth observation satellite in landmark achievement next week. Plus political parades in Sierra Leone banned ahead of presidential election. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawadu. We start in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 21 persons have died and several others are missing 1 day after a landslide in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo happened. The bodies of 8 women and 13 children were discovered after a landslide hit a river in the locality of Bolowa on Sunday as people were washing clothes and cleaning kitchenware. One person survived and has been taken to the healthcare center. A spokesperson for the governor of North Kivu province says the search efforts have continued since then. And still in the DRC, 6 people have been reported dead and dozens missing in a shipwreck on Lake Kivu. The capsized boat had left from Mogote on the southeastern coast of Ijwi Island in the South Kivu province when a strong wind caused it to capsize about 20 kilometers from its point of departure. Loaded with traders and their goods, it was heading for Goma, which is the capital of neighboring province in North Kivu. According to another administrative source, the boat was carrying about 150 passengers. 80 of them survived it. The bodies of 3 women and 3 children have also been recovered, and the search is still ongoing for other bodies involved. Staying in the Democratic Republic of Congo is not short of news today, as it has now extended the current marital law for the 45th time in the eastern provinces of North Kivu and in Ituri, where a decade-long rebel insurgency has raged on. The 15-day extension took effect on Sunday. The state of siege, a special martial law regime, was decreed in 2 provinces by President Felix Tshisekedi back in May 2021. The aim is to rein in runaway rebel violence in the 2 provinces by putting in place military administrations and heightening security operations there. A renewed rebellion by March 23 movement in North Kivu has compounded matters further as resources are now diverted to counter the incursion. And from DRC, we head to Kenya, where the country is preparing to launch its first ever Earth observation satellite in what it has described as a landmark achievement in the country's space exploration efforts. Nation 1, or Taifa 1 in Swahili, is scheduled to be launched next week aboard the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Vandenberg Space Force Base back in California. The satellite is designed to provide Earth observation data for use in agriculture, food security, and environmental management. The Defense Minister and Kenya Space Agency has said in a joint statement that it was fully designed and developed by Kenyan engineers in collaboration with a Bulgarian aerospace manufacturer. A delegation from Kenya is expected to travel to the United States for the launch. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the kingdom's Red Sea city of Jeddah as Cairo tries to navigate through an acute financial crisis. Both leaders met to discuss joint operation and regional developments. Saudi state-run SPA news agency has reported another Saudi and Egyptian officials, including Saudi National Security Advisor Mossad bin Mohammed al-Abein and Egypt's intelligence chief Abbas Kamel, also attended that meeting. Saudi Arabia has been providing substantial financial support to keep the Egyptian economy afloat and has repeatedly come to Cairo aid since el-Sisi took over power after leading the overthrow of the democratically elected president Mohamed Morsi in 2013. Now let's head back to our stories in the Democratic Republic of Congo and developments happening there. To give us an update on this is Mariama Diallo to give us to give us more perspective on the happenings in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she's joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. Hello, Mariama. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with this question on the possible impact. What possible impact does the government feel extending the martial law will, what will this have on Kenya as a country and, of course, on the people?
Well, I actually reached out to an MP. His name is Bertin Mubonzi, and he's the president of the Defense and Security Committee at the National Assembly. He said the reason for doing what they are actually calling the état de siège, or obviously the state of siege in the North Kivu and Ituri regions, is to establish peace and security in that area. They can't stop until that's accomplished. He said that it is needed to protect the population against the rebel groups, and especially you mentioned the M23, a group that he continued to refer to as a terrorist group. He hopes that this état de siège is not going to take long. And I asked him questions about these kinds of laws when they're passed. And sometimes, for example, the government has also been accused of basically using these laws to commit abuses. So he refuted that and said that this is a responsible and serious government that declared this état de siège. And it is to protect the population. They want an end to the crisis in that part of the DRC so the population can live in peace and security. Although he did say it is a militarized zone and sometimes they might behave a certain way, but he says they'll make sure that they hold anyone who commits abuses on the military side are held accountable.
But for most people, the impact they want to see is that whatever moves should actually lead to increase in safety and security, at least for the innocent citizens caught in the middle of all of this. Is that happening?
Absolutely. And I asked him that question. I guess they've had so many of them. I think this one is the 45th of its kind. I did ask him that question, and he said he is there. This is what they do, these kinds of things. They declare these kinds of laws to protect the innocent civilians. That's what they are basically meant to do.
And tragedy seems to be arriving in torrents, from one problem to another. But the conflict, plus even the natural disaster in form of a landslide and now a shipwreck, this is a country of no critical infrastructure to speak of. How are they coping with all the tragedy?
Yeah, I think sometimes when it rains, it pours. That's what they call it. It's just, you mentioned in the beginning of your broadcast that at least 20 people were killed, obviously, and several others missing after that landslide in the East DRC. The 6 people also killed and 64 others missing after that boat capsized in the Lake Kivu, also early morning. Obviously, the country is going through a lot. And I asked the MP, since he's the one I've reached out to, he said to me that he and others have reached out to lawmakers on the local and national level, asking them to take all the measures necessary so that these kinds of things won't happen anytime soon. But we know that these kinds of things happen, especially boat capsizing in so many other countries in Africa. And it's always the same talk. Okay, let's make sure that it doesn't happen anytime soon. But obviously, the people in charge of transport needs to reevaluate and figure out what the solution will be.
All right, thank you. As we know that, rescue efforts are still ongoing in that boat mishap. But thank you very much. Our thoughts and prayers are with those who have been affected by all of this. Thank you, Mariama, for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
To other stories now. My Constitution, My Voice. That was the theme of two youth fora jointly organized by the Community Outreach Unit and the Political Affairs Division of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan. That event targeted a wide spectrum of the country's youth with the aim of educating them on the constitution-making process. The Outreach Unit, as part of its mandate, creates platforms for relevant stakeholders, including the Ministry of Peacebuilding, to reach out to communities and educate them on the work of UNMISS, the process, and how citizens can get involved themselves.
The whole idea is to engage them, educate them about the permanent constitutional making process, field whatever question they may have, clear their doubts, and encourage them to have a say. We wanted them to become part of the whole process.
As UNMISS, we're very much aware that the youth of South Sudan make up over 70% of the population. We're also aware that, unfortunately, most often the youth and the women and other stakeholders and persons with disability are left out of peace processes and in particular negotiations of political processes. So it's a priority for UNMISS to make sure that the young people of South Sudan, be the future generation, the future owners, the future leaders of this country, that they should be involved in all aspects of making the permanent constitution of South Sudan. Because it's that process, it's that country, it's the constitution. So we need to hear their voices.
It is important for young people to know about the constitution making because, one, young people always complain that their voices are not heard and they are being neglected. But with this, it will give them the opportunity to see that they are being valued. Their voices have to be heard. So those of us who get opportunities to speak, we have to speak on behalf of the voices of the unheard. So young people come together, and that causes what? Social interaction. It diminishes tribalism, nepotism, and corruption, because all of us come together as one South Sudan.
I think definitely it's just like for us to maintain peace and calm. This country had underwent two different civil wars in the two different types of conflict in the past 10 years. So now it's a very crucial, we had a watershed moment where we have to choose what is going to be the next course of affairs, whether it's going to be, of course, another conflict, or we're going to choose a different path to resolving the differences in this country. And I think, especially the coming year, the 2024, it's a very determining year. It's a make or break situation. And the young people have a very pivotal role to play in that.
Staying in South Sudan, a United Nations-backed panel of investigators have alleged in a new report that several of its officials have perpetrated serious human rights violations and should be held accountable for the crimes. Top government and military leaders were identified on Monday in a new report by the UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan that details state responsibility for widespread murder, rape, and sexual slavery. The commission, which conducted one-year-long investigation across 6 states in South Sudan and released a partial summary of its findings in the month of March, said that none of those named in the final report had faced any accountability for their crimes. The report also identifies Joseph Monichuil, the governor of Unity State, along with Lieutenant General Thoy Chani of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces in relation to state-sanctioned killings in Mayom County in August 2022. Still ahead on the program. 10 people die from infection with the Marburg virus in Equatorial Guinea. We'll bring you the details of this and more. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Al-Nimeri Musa Mohammed has spent 25 years fishing on the Nile River. He has never been so worried about the future. Catches are dwindling and even more fishermen are now seeking other sources of income. Studies have shown the Nile's fish stock plummeting with rising temperatures fueled by climate change, overfishing, and a lack of state regulation cited as factors by researchers. While United Nations studies say that Sudan's fisheries make up the relatively little of the East African nation's gross domestic product, a precise breakdown is unavailable. The industry provides jobs. It's a key source of food and nutrition for a population of about 4 to 6 million. Sudanese fishermen like Mohammed, as well as academics, fear that not only are fish numbers decreasing, but some species are now disappearing entirely from the Nile River. The UN has been speaking on the security situation in Central African Republic. Briefing reporters on the situation, and spokesperson of the UN, Stefan Dujarric, said the body's peacekeeping mission there continues to provide the government with technical, financial, logistical, and security support. He adds that more people are now signing on to a peace agreement.
Repatriation process. On the Central African Republic, our peacekeeping mission there continues to provide the government with technical, financial, logistical, and security support to advance the national disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and repatriation process, which is a key component of the peace agreement. Recently, the peacekeeping mission donated vehicles and office equipment to help build the third mobile team conducting the disarmament and demobilization operations with the support of the peacekeepers. And just to flag that since the launch of this disarmament demobilization process in 2018, support provided by the United Nations has enabled the effective disarmament and demobilization of 4,227 ex-combatants, and that includes 254 women from the 14 different armed groups who signed on to the peace agreement.
A new provisional death toll from the Marburg virus outbreak that has been raging for more than 2 months in Equatorial Guinea has now reached 10 confirmed deaths. The Ministry of Health says a total of 604 people in contact are now being monitored, compared to 825 on March the 30th. Just last week, the World Health Organization called on Equatorial Guinea to report cases of the Marburg virus because of fears of more widespread contamination than previously thought. But the UN agency was alarmed at the potential large-scale epidemic, which could affect neighboring Gabon and even Cameroon. Cases have been reported outside the province of Kientem, where it caused the first known death on January the 7th, reaching Bata, which is the country's economic capital. WHO announced the deployment of additional experts and said that it was also helping Gabon and Cameroon to strengthen preparedness and response to this problem. Let's talk more on this with the Director, Global Health and Infectious Diseases Institute in Nasarawa State University, KEFI, and a consultant public health physician, Dr. Akiala Ishaku. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishaku, for joining us. He's joining us from the nation's capital, Abuja.
Thank you for having me, and good evening.
Thank you for joining us. So how does Marburg come? I mean, how did this even come about, and what does it look like when one is infected? And so
Marburg virus was a hemorrhagic fever virus that belongs to the same family with Ebola virus. It has its own host on humans and other non-human primates. So fruit bats are also reservoirs for these viruses. And so the transmission is when humans have an encounter with this bat. So the transmission can be zoonotic in nature. And so there has been a global outbreak. The worst outbreak was seen in 2005 in Angola. And we have been seeing sporadic cases of this Marburg virus again in Tanzania and now in Equatorial Guinea. And so some of the clinical signs and symptoms are failure in kidney failure. You also have issues of fever. That's the characteristic signs and symptoms of Ebola. You also have anorexia, difficulty in loss of appetite, and all what have you. So it has the same clinical presentation with Ebola, signs and symptoms, just like Ebola, and then it has a very high case fatality rate. The case fatality rate ranges between 24 to 88%, and it has also been established that it has a very short incubation period.
So are you saying that it's a very deadly virus? I mean, how serious is this? In Tanzania, 2 people have been reported dead and other places to have recorded deaths. But how seriously should we be taking this virus?
Absolutely, the virus is quite a very deadly virus, and that's why it established a case fatality rate of over 50%. Any disease that can establish a case fatality of more than 50%, it shows that in 2 persons that are infected with this disease, one is likely to die. That is a likelihood of the case fatality rate of 50%. And so it calls for concern, it calls for a lot of epidemiological surveillance, it calls for a lot of health advocacy, just like what we are doing now on African network. So, it is a deadly disease, and it also falls within the same family with the Ebola virus.
And talking about advocacy, what can be done to stop the spread of this virus?
So what can be done to stop the spread of the virus? One is to establish active epidemiological surveillance. People that are infected, they need to be isolated, they need to be treated. Healthcare workers need to have a high suspicious index because it has been established in Tanzania and Equatorial Guinea that most of the cases that are positive are from healthcare workers. People that attend to people in clinical settings need to also establish high suspicious index. We need to also take this message to community. So we need community ownership of understanding the dynamics of this disease, how it is being transmitted. If we're able to establish this great advocacy within at the community and population level, definitely the chain of transmission will be interfered, and then it will be broken. But by and large, we need to also establish a very active case search.
Well, the WHO has already said it might be affecting other countries, but Cameroon is just here. I mean, is Nigeria currently guarding against it? And how are we doing this, if we are doing it?
Yeah, so you know that a lot of infectious diseases are quite just like what you saw during COVID-19. You find out that international travels and globalization establish the transmission of dynamics of diseases, and so people travel from one country to another, countries that these diseases are endemic, and then they travel to other countries. Of course, understanding the genomic surveillance and epidemiology of this virus, there has been traces of this virus that has been connected to Cameroon. And you know the Nigeria borders with Cameroon, it shows that we need to tighten up our borders, quite key. We need to establish active surveillance on our border, on our ports. In time past, I called for an institutional collaborations. During COVID, we had an opportunity to actually update and upgrade most of these facilities. I am hoping that in our times and in our seasons and in the next administration, we should be able to see institutions like customs and immigration begin to establish a very strong port of entry health unit where a lot of vaccination profile things people can be able to be certified whether they have been vaccinated towards certain diseases, and people can also be tested for certain diseases that are highly communicable. So Nigeria needs to sit up. Nigeria, we need to also have a very active case search, epidemiological surveillance on our borders, and also begin to go into aggressive community advocacy and begin to tell people about these diseases. Not only these diseases, but diseases that are quite seasonal and endemic to our country.
All right. Consultant public health physician, Dr. Akiala Ishaku, thank you very much for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Nigerian Afrobeat star Davido has set a new record on Apple Music with his latest album, Timeless. It has had the most first-day streams ever for an African album. The music streaming service has said in a tweet, the 17-track album was released on the 31st of March, and it is the musician's fourth. The album has already broken the record for the biggest debut week on Spotify Nigeria, and he is the biggest in first-day streams on Boomplay. And on that note, we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu.